I knew that this score was going to be something that had to be invented on its own. It was something that had to be found. It wasn't something that people do. I knew that this was going to take looking at this world, looking at the music that we're using, and looking at the emotion. And the more I thought about it, the more I started to say, I'm sorry to say this. I know I'm a fan. People know that I'm a fan. I really think that BT's the only guy I think can do it. And it's because BT is so flexible, first of all, sophisticated, second of all, and has such an ability to look at what he's doing. Such a broad range of music, almost what surprised people when I said that I wanted was they associated BT with a certain kind of thing.
After I did Fast and Furious, I got asked to do anything that had wheels and moved quickly. You know, I was like, it's Fast and Furious on roller skates, it's Fast and Furious on jet skis. I'm like, I don't want to do it. I picked it up, you know, out of a stack of scripts and I read it on a plane, and I was moved beyond belief. The first time Patty and I got together, you know, she told me about, she augmented Eileen's story for me and told me some background details about her life, a really earnest and really truthful, powerful story, and it was something I really wanted to be involved in, and that I knew I could write some special music for.
I had always read a lot of true crime and noticed a lot of, different things. And when her story broke, I remember being very struck by it the first time I saw it on the news, particularly as it unfolded. First of all, it was such an interesting phenomenon that this hooker had turned and killed all of her Johns. But then, she was called the, lesbian, man-hating, all of these things. And very shortly, she was then convicted, and the news showed what is the last scene in the film, which is her crying as her girlfriend testified against her. And this phone conversation was played. And I was just always struck very hard by this confusion of what had led up to this story, and just that all of the words that she was this man-hating, vicious serial killer didn't make any sense in context with what I was seeing.
One of the most inspirational parts of the process to me was delving into the whole surround sound thing, because I don't think people really are writing in it for the most part. It's more of an afterthought. Designing the sound of this score, this score was conceived from the ground up in 5/1. And one of the most exciting things actually about recording some of the original template sessions was finding placements for the loops in a surround space to create this really immersive environment. I treated the space totally irreverently because, that's who I am as a person, basically. And I just got all punk rock on it, and said, hey, let's try some really interesting things. So in terms of placement, I do snare up, left channel, snare down, right channel, kit going to the sub, the tom mics in the back, the overheads to the sides. And so it's a very immersive sounding score, and it's a component of it that I'm really excited about.
Once we started working together, it was such a fascinating process. It was such a fascinatingly deep process. We were searching and feeling and finding, and meanwhile BT was coming up with these amazing things like the hurdy-gurdy.
There was one instrumentalist called Ben Grossman, who I've since become really good friends with, and he was playing an instrument called the violon, which is also known as the hurdy-gurdy. It's a 15th century French instrument. And I heard the sound of this, and I was like, this guy has to play on the score for this film. And Ben became an extraordinarily important sound of the score. The hurdy-gurdy became almost a timbral theme throughout the film. The crux of it really became prepared and acoustic pianos, acoustic guitar, hurdy-gurdy, and some live bass drums and guitar that we recorded. But it makes for this really, really exotic, interesting sound that sounds harmonically like more traditional roots Americana type stuff. When you think of sort of like Copland-esque type things mixed with, Southern acoustic instrumentation, but then with this whole augmented, spectral element to it, by bringing something like the hurdy-gurdy in, and just the amount of treatments that we did to that instrument. So it's a really interesting sounding score. We recorded all of the hurdy-gurdy here, and that was actually one of the most exciting parts of the process, was just having Ben here, working out tunings for his instrument, and then I'd write a melody or come up with a harmonic idea and then just let Ben improvise. And he'd do these incredible extended improvisations for sometimes like 10, 15 minutes. And those became templates that I would always go back to and pull from, almost like sampling from, in order to keep some, timbral through lines through the film. So it has a sound to it, the whole film. The second John was actually a really interesting process working on that cue.
It was a challenge to do momentous music and not have it say, "Oh, she's going to shoot this guy."
Yeah.
Have the power and the drums speak to her tension of being there.
Right.
And then kind of level off, and then how that instrumentation built based on her reaction to what was happening. So it starts to amp up a little bit once he's offering her the
I
money.
think nobody'd ever talked dirty to you before.
Yeah, no, man. I just like to settle first, you know?
Call me daddy while I fuck you, huh?
Try. Why, you like to fuck your kids?
What?
Once the want to call me daddy part is gone,
Right.
and then when he says the thing about coming over here and it triggers something, that then the instrumentation then echoed back to the first murder. But then also as the drums dropped out, we got into her headspace.
Exactly. We
And then
started
that was the
speaking to her
crescendo
yeah.
instead of the gunshot being the crescendo.
My gut reaction as a composer was to say the climax is the gunshot, and and it wasn't. It was like there were multiple climaxes in that piece of music, but I think the most important one was when we enter into her internal dialogue.
Yeah.
You know?
So it was the fact that the crescendo's already happened and we're sliding downwards on the music, and the boom, gunshot happens and the guy's dying. And you're kind of like, whoa, like it really gave that feeling of, I'm not sure why I shot, instead of saying like it all built up to I couldn't take it anymore and I shot him, instead it was like, I couldn't take it anymore, I'm sitting there, the next thing I knew, I'd shot him.
The hurdy-gurdy's played with a pumice wheel, and that bow articulation where he scrapes the pumice wheel against the melodic strings, that sounds similar to the ponticello articulation on strings where they really dig in near the bridge. That sound became the sound of the murders. And so when we go into an internal dialogue, I brought that bow articulation on the hurdy-gurdy back, and then we have this string sweeping stuff. But it really was contrarian to where typically
Right. Which
the-
we did all the time. I mean,
Yeah,
so often, like your first pass of something and my first thoughts and directions to you
Right.
played out a little more overtly, as did everything in this whole film. And we had to sit there and figure out what it was.
Yeah.
And get to a place where we were playing it in a slightly more sophisticated way.
Definitely.
And throw away things that were powerful, you know?
What are you trying to say?
I could train myself into anything. People always look down their noses at hookers. Never give you a chance because they think you took the easy way out. When no one could imagine the willpower it took to do what we do.
Another interesting place was the Ferris wheel, because there's something so by that point, you're hearing her talk in a voiceover. She's basically talking about murder and the fact that she's willing to do anything, and it's such an educated theme at that moment, and
Yeah.
how powerful the feeling is. It's going against what you've just heard, and then you're seeing them together, and she's overcoming fear. It became this third thing,
Yeah.
which is this very educated, very sophisticated beauty that she's getting out of what she's willing to do.
You okay?
It's the thing about that piece of music too is it is sort of like an educated, beautiful piece of music, but it's also very simple melodically. And it's funny because that's the one piece of music for this film that was just literally instantaneous.
I
for
know,
me.
and interestingly also is definitely also a place where I look at it now, and I sort of, that is the creation, that scene, that the end result is something that I did not direct. It was some place that you all took it to another level.
The bus stop was another, like, that was probably the hugest moment to write to in the film. It's got the treated pianos, some of the melodic stuff from the Bad Cop motifs, and then gets into actually one of the templates that I wrote for the score originally, you remember.
Yeah.
So it goes through this whole kind of evolutionary process, and then finally evolves and crescendos into the theme, you know, which is a very emotional moment where she's saying goodbye. Patty been talking to Steve Perry from Journey about, you know, I guess we had the song in the film already at that point. We had Don't Stop Believing in the film already.
Yes. Steve showed up to check out what we were doing and to help us mix the song in and everything.
Yeah, and then Steve sat with Brian Bowman, you know, our music editor, and was like, you need to put a version of the theme in the end, and ended up taking the theme and cutting it up to picture. So we got to give Steve Perry some props, because really, ultimately, like the initial template that I ended up writing to was what Steve and Brian cut to picture.
It ended up being a mixture of all of the moments that we all separately thought. Like a lot of those moments were not the moments that I realized were the most important.
Yeah, that's true too.
And there are all these different moments, some of which were mine, some of which were yours, some of which he had done in his template.
Yeah, like the gavel.
Yeah.
The gavel was one that he picked that I don't think either one of us
Neither
would
of
have
us
picked.
would have.
Yeah.
Thank you, Judge. And may you rot in hell, sending a raped woman to death.
Patty kept talking about this scene needs to, musically, this scene needs to release us so we're able to walk away from this story. And so the final permutation of the theme, the crux of it that ended up, you know, being that score cue, really is a more, I don't want to use the word angsty, but it's a more distant perspective of the theme.
Love conquers all. Every cloud has a silver lining. Faith can move mountains. Love will always find a way. Everything happens for a reason. Where there's life, there's hope. Oh, well. They gotta tell you something.
The picture, for most people, is the focal point of a film, as well as the dialogue and the performances and all of that. And the job of the music is to augment emotionally what's happening in the film. And so it was really fun to work on this as a score album, because there was a lot of music that had reached sort of, you know, in terms of pieces, actual pieces of music, had reached maybe 80% of their potential. So in augmenting them for the score album, you know, I let them flourish when in the score we would have to keep them subdued at times, because it was, you know, tonally appropriate to the film. It was just really exciting, you know, to take those ideas and augment them and make them into completed pieces of music that are pieces of music independent of, yet related to the film, you know. It was a really exciting part of the process.
I know how music makes me feel, but I don't know anything about how that music works. So BT's having to interpret what I'm feeling, and I'm sitting here, you know, trying to verbalize things, and BT saying, hang on, hang on, hang on, and then he plays something and I just sit down and start crying, you know, and I was like, I don't know what that was, but all right, you know? And so it's just this fascinating process for me to lay in the background of a room and watch somebody else bring something so beautiful and perfect to life in front of me that I have no understanding how it works. But I knew that it was right.